This conference will now be recorded.
Now Mario can
I
hear
should have
us.
the go-to recording for the beginning, so, okay, thank
Okay.
you, I apologize.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for holding me up. All right.
Can you
so-
hear us, Mario? Okay.
All right. Comments from the public, item 6, must be limited to items not on the agenda. Must state name and address, limited to 5 minutes. Board's role is to listen and not discuss the item. Personal issues cannot be discussed, nor individual's name, and board's not able to take any action at this meeting. No one online, I don't believe, no one in the audience. Does anybody else have comment or public comment? I do have one, so I will take my hat off and come as Tracy Cookie, 1144 Hawthorne Road. My husband and I bicycled to downtown Green Bay this morning, and we took Hanson Road, so we're heading eastbound on Hanson Road. And the amount of glass in Hanson Road on the bike lanes from Ashland to Broadway is terrible. You couldn't basically ride in the bike lane. Then when we got on Broadway going northbound, so on the east side of Broadway, the bike lane on the east side of Broadway is really full of glass. The southbound lane on Broadway coming back down wasn't as bad, but there still is quite a bit of glass in there. So it's that time of year again, and people are going to be biking. And as the trucks cross the railroad tracks on Hanson, all of that glass goes everywhere, and it makes that bike lane unrideable. So it just comments and see if we can look into that.
It was being swept this afternoon,
Was it? Oh, good. I saw the sweeper up by my neighborhood,
the whole road.
the whole road.
He was going right down the street, down the middle, down everything.
Good.
So,
Hanson and Broadway both are just on
we
the road.
want
just down, must have been an employee of the recycle.
Yep.
And he was out there with on his big sweeper,
Okay,
and, yeah,
cool.
so that was this afternoon.
He told us that.
They must have had you on their ring camera.
Smaller sweeper.
Pardon me?
They must have had you on their ring camera.
Yeah, they must have. I saw us go by this morning at 6 a.m. and said, oh,
I
there
think
goes
it's on
Tracy
Tracy
here.
first.
Yeah, we better get this sweeping. So, and it was bad, like right around obviously the recycling center was really bad there. So I'm glad to hear
They must have already had done that because they were like a whole block away,
Yeah, they only go all the way up.
Oh, yeah, they were.
So, all right, so yeah, and again, Joel, I don't know who takes care of that stretch of Hanson. I always forget if it's us or if it's county. So,
Both are county, but I
okay,
think we talked to them that if you have issues, let us know. We will certainly reach out to the county. You're welcome to do so as well.
Okay.
The Port and Solid Waste is the entity that's responsible for it, even though it's a county truck highway. We were told that highway is kind of delegated it to the recycling center. They bought that little kind of golf cart version street sweeper,
Yeah,
which is
that's what it was.
Saw.
Yeah.
It's not the most effective tool at cleaning up glass. It's more designed for the parking lots.
Yep.
But if it continues on, then what we've said is, we will check it periodically and do it ourselves too, just to keep it clean. But if it becomes excessive, then we'll have further conversations with the county. So if you see something, let us know. We're not necessarily always hitting that, but when our street sweepers go out, we usually pick up that stretch. That's what we've asked, but for whatever reason, highway and port solid waste, for whatever reason, don't necessarily see complaints.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So that's my public comment. Does anybody else have anything? Otherwise, we will go back to
So maybe they could get to the source for the railroad tracks. Because I don't want to drive over them railroad tracks. I had to literally stop before I go over.
Those
They're
are
probably
bad.
all breaking, all the glass is
Exactly,
breaking
it's
when they
turning
bounce
everything.
the truck over the top
Yep.
of it. They are bad.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, they're
Yeah,
terrible.
they are bad.
I think if you recall, Dean Hain was here 6, 8 months ago already now and kind of described that these recycling trucks, the seals on the
Yeah, I remember
compartments
that.
aren't good, and so like it's kind of caught in the seals, and that's what's
Yeah.
bouncing out of them. There's not a whole lot
When they hit the ground and then break.
till they can
Yeah.
figure out a new way to seal or some new technology to encase that compartment better.
Yeah.
We'll see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably gonna be an ongoing problem, but just maybe between the county and the village and the port can stay on top of it more and sweep more often, because it just needs it. Because there's such a
Well, my only
source
thought
there.
was it tracks, because if you're not seeing it up further in Hanson, something's breaking from that point
Right.
on.
Trucks are turning in that way and that's the way they're going up.
So maybe it's
recycling
not
center.
the seals, maybe it's the seals, but once it's broken, it's in pieces.
Right, and then it's out of.
But I don't know what it is like to get a railroad. I think we had a hard time getting
Oh,
up to the tracks, and so I won't go there.
All right. Any other public comments? Otherwise, we'll go on to 7, reports and updates. Public safety is not here. Anyone have anything from public safety they want to share? Otherwise, we'll
I didn't get a report.
continue on. Okay. Public Works, we do have the Public Works report in here.
Yeah, I'll just touch on that real briefly. As you probably have seen, if you've gone past the Marty Access Road, they are making tremendous progress on that. I think the final pour for sidewalk was either today or it will be tomorrow, depending on weather. And then once that sidewalk is done, they'll be backfilling along that curb line and the sidewalk, so they'll do the restoration work prior to putting pavement down. So if you've driven past it, you'll see they've done the restoration on the Lombardi Road side, so that's done. Once the restoration is done behind the sidewalk, then they'll begin putting the mat of pavement down on the road. It's anticipated that portion of the project will be done before the end of May.
Nice.
So they're moving very, very quickly. Then once that's done, then they'll move down Marley. There are those crossing points along Marley by the gas station, retail center, and then the Titletown office building and apartments. So that'll be done in concert with the Brookwood sidewalk as well. So all that would be done simultaneously. My understanding is that should move pretty quickly. I thought he said June, but it could be end of July by the time everything's wrapped up. So it'll be done for sure before training camp starts at the end of July. Industrial Park Trail reconditioning is part of the mill pave bid for the year. That's out presently. Those bids will come back tomorrow at 2:00. Eventually make their way to the village board for approval at the end of the month. They're still doing design work and planning for the West Main Trail sidewalk extension. And again, that's just to identify where the right of way is, where the utility conflicts are, and then kind of do a preliminary design of what could fit within what we have available for access, and then what would be needed in the event that additional access easements right away are necessary. Traffic signal controller replacements, that's been kind of an ongoing project. Those are all out to bid right now. Those will come in, I think, on Thursday or Friday this week. Then those will go to the board again in May, and so we'll keep moving on that. There's really kind of no major updates from the other 2 projects as far as the roundabout, the push buttons for the countdown timers from the city of Green Bay.
Just a comment, the industrial, that might be me, because I didn't do much bike riding last year with remodeling at home. But oh my gosh, I mean, I can't remember what the roads are, but with the big culverts are, all the trees are gone, so that when you're getting to the road, you can actually see if there's traffic coming. I loved it. It's really nice
Yeah, they
compared to
did.
what it was. You didn't clear it out. So kudos to whoever flavor that was.
Yeah, they did take a lot out of there.
Oh my gosh. It helps.
Any questions on public works or engineering, or Joel, anything else to add? So- Parks and Rec.
Well, everyone get their pens or pencils out and put down the date of Tuesday, June 18th at 11 a.m. That's the ribbon cutting for the Ashwaubenon River Trail Bridge and Trail Extension.
What time did you say?
What time?
Tuesday, June 18th,
Yeah.
11 a.m.
At the bridge?
at the bridge. So we've got that. Haley is actually working on some invites that we will be sending out to committee members and members of the general public, residents, that type of thing, and then we'll put it up on Facebook pages that we are in charge of. So yeah, that's kind of exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah, really that.
That's
Now I've
great.
got another date.
Oh,
Well, it's not really trail work, but I'm gonna pass on that one. That's for some water improvements in Ashwaubenon, Dutchman's Creek. That's all. But that being said, the next phase of the trail around is around Ashwaubenon Park. So Grafe, I talked with Patrick on Thursday of last week. I am hoping that I get some final paperwork on it this week, and then it'll be going out either this week or next week to bid. That's our goal. That will be for the next phase around Ashwaubenon Park, behind the lake and on the backside of New Water.
so you're anticipating getting it done this year then? What's it going out, or?
That's going to depend on the bids. You know, this is quite honestly getting out 2 months later than we had hoped. So it depends on what the bids come back. If not this year, we may need to push it to next year. But if the bids are okay, then, you know, if it's a good filler project, then maybe this year.
Nice.
It depends on what the final costs are. We do have a couple overlook areas on the north point and just north of the lake where we have access to the trail from the lake parking lot. So that's all included in the bid, and then the stairway where the boat launch is, instead of using those railroad ties that are all different, they're hard to get up. So we're actually trying to do a real concrete steps up there with a railing to make it more accessible for people that park in the boat launch lot and have to go up, whether it be to something at Shelter 4 or whether it be to a special event within the park. We want it to be more safer, let's just say safer.
Yep. Nice.
Is that where it's gonna end?
The steps.
The trail?
No, the trail. So the trail will start where the trailhead is right now.
Okay.
The new trailhead at the north end of the lake parking lot.
Mhm.
And it'll go behind the Ashwaubenon Lake all the way
Because that's
to,
all gravel.
all the way to the southern fence line.
Okay.
Along the water.
Behind the veterans' little fire pit and all that, right?
Yeah, and then it'll loop around New Water. That's the Boy Scouts fire pit area. So it'll go then to Ashwaubenon Creek. And then it'll cut in to the north and end where the boat launch parking lot is.
Taking care of the people that live down there.
Yeah, really, I'll tell you. All those people that live down there.
So the only part it's not covering really is along Ashwaubenon Creek. There's the woods right there. There's already kind of a trail going through there.
Right.
And then a little bit of a crusher dust pathway going around that northwest corner. So that's going to stay natural, but this trail will go from the current trailhead all the way to the boat launch, which is about 3/4 of the way around the park.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Tracy, at one of the prior meetings, I suggested that we do some, just thank you to the people who, whether it's Rex and his department or the village board or whatever, to just thank them for doing that. And at that time, the response was, well, when the ribbon cutting is, there's a ceremony, we should try to do it then. So it would be nice if we could include that in. Just to acknowledge the people who've done a lot of work and put a lot of effort in, whether it's Rex or the village, thank the village board.
It's a good idea. I'm sure Rex is working on the ceremony.
Yeah, I would like to say I am, but that's still on the to-do list.
Well, okay, so
We know that there's gonna be hot dogs there.
there you
There
go.
is, we're gonna, we'll be busting out the new hot dog trailer that we want,
Oh, yay. That's the important part.
right? Got all these people there right before the noon hour, they're gonna be hungry.
There you go. No, and that's a great point, Pat, because a lot of people put a lot of time and energy into it. I'm sure it'll be part of the ceremony. I would assume it typically is that they would acknowledge or thank those people for
I think the
their hard work.
Bike and Pedestrian Committee Chairman might be invited to say a brief statement or two at the ceremony. We'll wait and see.
I guess I've always felt that if people in positions of authority or power or whatever you want to say, they hear when somebody's unhappy, so when they do something right, we should thank them.
True.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else, Rex?
Nope.
No. All right, we got you done before your daughter's softball game.
I got 12 minutes. to hang
There you go. Any questions for Rex? Otherwise, I know Mario is here. Mario, you have anything from Wello? No. Can't hear you, Mario. He's not muted.
He unmuted.
He's unmuted. Just a minute. Oh,
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You can hear me?
No. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So just quick updates. So at the last day of April, we held a community public session for the bike and pedestrian safety and frogger training that Peter and We Bike ETC led. So it was great to see the turnout. I want to thank Tracy and Dale for attending that. So I think that turned out extremely well. During that 1 hour session in classroom time, it was talking about leading causes of crashes when it comes to involving bike and pedestrians. We talked about countermeasures. We talked about engineering. So it's just a really great insight into what goes into making it safer and easier for everyone to walk and bike in our community. So again, thank you for attending that. Then the next day we held the law enforcement officer session. So same training that the community was receiving, we offered to the law enforcement. Peter also led that one as well. This was the second year that this was made available to the law enforcement partners for our Frogger efforts, and excited to share that Ashwaubenon had actually 4 members from Ashwaubenon Public Safety. So we had 2 people attend the morning as well as 2 in the afternoon. We had a representative from UWGB, so they are looking at getting involved. So they would be our 7th law enforcement partner that would join. That would continue our streak of every year we've added a new partner. Their involvement may look a little bit different, just given that our Frogger dates, with 2 of them most likely happening with the majority of the students off of campus, there might not be much going on, but the officer who did attend actually said he's already doing a lot of work around bike pedestrian on campus. So I told him, just please make me aware of that, and we can definitely have you be members of this partnership and just kind of promote what is going on, even if they aren't able to actually hold their operations on the exact dates. And in terms of those dates, so I am waiting on confirmation, but we are aiming for Thursday, June 27th to be the first one. So that will kind of be the kids are out of school. We're going to have lots of foot traffic. We're in the middle of summer. So just kind of making drivers aware to expect more foot and bike traffic during that time. Then the second will take place Thursday, August 22nd. So that would be the preparation for the return of school. So seeing more kids in the school areas, more foot traffic. And then the third would be Wednesday, October 2nd, which is the first Wednesday of October every year is National Walk to School Day. So coinciding with that. So just waiting for confirmation on all the departments that those dates do in fact work for all of them. As soon as I do have confirmation, I can pass that along, but those are the 3 dates we are looking at. And yeah, and then those are my updates. And just wanted to say congratulations to the village on tomorrow's NFL draft handoff. So I think that's gonna be exciting. So congratulations on that.
Mario. One of the things Mario mentioned, and you guys hopefully grabbed a copy of these, Mario had at one of the trainings, the pedestrian safety fact sheet. So I just want to touch on it just for your information. This kind of gives you some really good information about how many crashes we have a year typically, where they're taking place, what time of day, what day of the week it's most common. It just kind of spells it out, you know, like the pedestrians age 15 to 24 are the most at risk. Obviously, our older pedestrians are highly at risk. It talks about different places where pedestrian locations crashes are typically. On the bottom of the back, it's current pedestrian laws, like what pedestrians should be following, and then, you know, what you can do, looking at it from a motorist or in the pedestrian standpoint. So these are just really good fact sheets to give you some ideas on, you know, what's out there, and also helps us when we're looking at different roadways or different projects as a committee to say, okay, how does this fit? How does this help make maybe these crashes less likely? So this is just, again, for your information. Please read it, and you know, just maybe you'll pick up a few things that will help you in your decision making when we're talking about different projects in the village. And then there's a similar one, the bicycle safety crash sheet, which wasn't given out at the training because it was mainly pedestrians, but again, the same thing. 9 pedestrians were killed, and this one's from 2021 in Wisconsin. Again, it gives you a trend of, you know, going up and down. It's pretty small numbers, so when you have one increase, it really shoots the average up again. Again, talks about days that it's more common for a bicyclist to get hit or have an injury. The times, again, a lot of it with bikes and pedestrian is during that prime time when people are coming home from work, so that 3 to 6 timeline. People are tired driving, maybe not paying as much attention. They're going to the softball game, they're heading to the soccer game. And they're just not watching, or the pedestrian or bicyclist is tired as well. Most bicycle crashes occur in the urban areas, not as much in the rural areas. So that tells us we're predominantly an urban area in Ashwaubenon. We have a few rural areas. So more of the crashes are going to happen in our urban areas. So that's where we need to focus our energies on trying to make our urban area streets as bicycle safe as we can. Again, it has bike laws, what drivers can do, and what cyclists can do. So again, these are just really good information sheets just to kind of help guide you when we're thinking and talking about different roads in the village of Ashwaubenon. Mario, anything to add on those 2 documents at all? That
I think the last thing I should piggyback on that will be Wello's May Press Gazette column. Actually was talking about some of the key points that Peter hit on during the training, and I believe that is out now. Double checking, should have come out in yesterday's print edition, so it should be available online. And I kind of focused on 2 of the topics that had the most discussion, which, this was both in the community session we saw this and with the officers. Really that first one is, so when does the failure to yield actually happen? So we kind of just go into detail of like, this is what a pedestrian has to do for an officer to go, oh, okay, there was the failure to yield. So we touch on that. And then the second was highlighting a situation when you have 2 lanes of traffic heading in the same direction. If the vehicle closest to the curb starts to yield to the pedestrian, the concern is what happens if the vehicle behind me doesn't yield, and what happens if the vehicle in the lane next to me doesn't yield. Am I potentially setting up a pedestrian to enter the crosswalk to then get hit by the next lane of traffic? So that was another discussion point that we had on there, again, with both community and law enforcement. So the Press Gazette column highlights those 2 questions and kind of goes into detail of what Peter was talking about, and what actually constituted and how to safely ensure that a person can cross a crosswalk when there's 2 lanes of traffic in the same direction, and then what you as a pedestrian can do to help make sure that safely happens.
Thanks, Mario.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mario or anything else on Wello, you guys?
No, just glad you could share it. I did read it in the paper. It was good.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And then I have one more thing. Mario did mention it briefly, but the Village Restaurant, tomorrow is the Green Bay Packers are doing a symbolic, basically take the football from Detroit, Michigan's coming across on the ferry to Milwaukee, and then a group of bicyclists are going to be biking it out to Green Bay. So I would invite you, if you have young children that would like to get involved, have them at Armed Forces in Hinckley Field at 6 o'clock. and they can bike in with the group into Lambeau Field. And then the group will be coming in at 6:30 into Lambeau Field in the atrium area. And they will have a press conference, and then they'll start the countdown clock for the draft. It's just a symbolic handoff of the football from one state to the next state. The governor will be down in Milwaukee and taking the football and handing it off to the bicyclists. And as Mario mentioned, Peter and I are honored to be a group of part of the group of bicyclists bicycling that football up here. So that will be fun. So we're looking forward to doing that tomorrow. Although it's supposed to be cold and very windy, and the wind coming from the north, but we'll do it. Yeah.
And
But yes,
Tracy, I did.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was to say, I did just in the message, I just dropped the Packers official press release announcing it, so that has all the details that you just shared in it as well. So if you needed to share that out with the group, all the details are in there.
Okay, thanks, Marcy. If you can't do anything tomorrow night, please go over to Lambeau and welcome the football and the excitement of the countdown.
And the clock is for Joel and like his group?
Yeah, so they know they can look at it and go,
No pressure.
no. Now we're down to 300 days. Oh, no.
Sorry, don't have enough time.
Yeah.
He has a clock at his office too. He looks at it every day.
Yeah.
And at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. All right. Any other updates for anybody? Otherwise, we will go on to 8, which is Mario. Thank you for attending.
Thank you all. Take care.
Yep. You too. Thanks, Rex.
Hey, real quick here. When are they going to park? When they install them?
Oh,
Somebody's asking.
the third week in July, right after AYB and AGSA get done with their game. So I want to say maybe the week of June 22nd, July 22nd, maybe?
That's close enough.
The week of July 22nd.
Thank you, Rex.
Take care.
Item 8, items for discussion and possible action. 8A is consider, discuss, act on visually narrowed lanes in the village of Ashwaubenon. This we discussed a bit at our last meeting, and Joel put a cover letter together in regards to it. So Joel, maybe if you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think this was just discussed at last month's meeting about visually narrowed lanes, kind of what are they, what purpose do they serve? Really, I guess what I'll say is that a visually narrowed lane is 2 things. A visually narrowed lane is an idea in concept. There is no legal standing as to what it is. It's a concept that you're going to visually narrow a travel lane for vehicles, traditionally used for traffic calming purposes, especially in the form of an urban cross-section. Urban cross-section is a road that has curb and gutter, okay? You will hear engineers talk about a visually narrowed lane, that white lane or that white line being a fog line. So oftentimes you would put the white line on the rural section where it's dark and stormy and foggy 90% of the time as a fog line, because it was shown that over time that actually reduced crashes because you could visually see the lane in which you needed to travel. It has been used in urban settings to narrow the travel lane for vehicles. In theory, it was to add a calming feature to that. So if you visually think the lane is narrower, you are likely to drive at a reduced speed. So the idea was to calm traffic. Visually narrowed lane, from an Ashwaubenon perspective, and how I look at it is it's kind of a self-defined thing as well. I don't know what the full history or context is, but at one point, individuals in the community, instead of installing, let's say, sidewalks and separating pedestrians in the roadway, they said, well, we'll just mark a lane in the road and then it'll be kind of a shared use component in the road. And then I don't know if it was Peter or Tracy back 20 years ago when the plan was first created, but we will call them visually narrowed lanes, or maybe it was somebody else, and that'll be how we accommodate pedestrians. So it had been put into practice over many, many years as new subdivisions came in or routes were identified to move pedestrians in their eyes more safely. They began to be used more and more propensity. So the list that's in the plan is listed in the cover sheet. These were all the roads at the time that the plan was most recently revised that featured these visually narrowed lanes. And again, there's really, they're not anything but a white line on pavement. That's all they are. They have no legal standing. They don't provide any added feature or benefit to the road. So if a motorist is driving on that section of the road, there's no penalty. There's no legal authority that the village can do. You can park in it. You could ride your bike in it. I suppose you could walk in it. You can drive in it. So it's a market, really, is all it is. Certainly does not provide any defined safety feature, but it does give, I guess, encouragement to users of the road that says, okay, this area is intended to be designated for something other than driving, right? So the plan identified some of the disadvantages of these visually narrow lanes, and so I included those in the cover letter. So again, there's nothing in traffic law that defines them, so there's nothing that you could theoretically enforce or provide benefit to. They may confuse motorists, because like, well, what is that? Is that a parking lane? Is that a driving lane? Is that a bike lane? What is that lane? So it certainly can confuse people, and as a result of that, it may, depending on the motorist and their perception, negate any benefit that others may see present. And then when things are ambiguous, it makes it very difficult for law enforcement to do anything about it. So it has to be, in order for a law to be enforced, it has to be clear and defined. Because there isn't one, there's nothing there. Clearly, this area is intended to be used, again, based on who thought it was a positive idea at the time, for all modes of transportation. So bicyclists, pedestrians, scooters, skateboarders, whatever, anybody can use it. And if that is the case, then generally speaking, you're going to run into the same kind of conflicts that you would have on a multi-use trail. Now, with that being said, a multi-use trail has clearly defined law. So you can enforce things. So if a bicyclist is flying down a multi-use side path or trail, they have to follow certain rules in the road as it relates to pedestrians and so on and so forth. So there's more enforcement then versus just carte blanche on the road. Parking of vehicles could be certainly expected in these locations. And then the other thing it should be of note is that these visually narrow lanes, depending on which road you're on, may be different in width from the face of curb to the line. So some of them could be 6 feet, some of them could be 8 feet, some of them could be 11 feet. Each road has a different width, and as a result of that, you can have conflict with the door, if you will. So I think bicyclists know that, right? The door dings. Somebody's in their car, they swing the door open, they don't realize you're coming down the road on your bike, and you hit their door and you fly over your bike. So there's those kind of conflicts as well. Certainly can provide a false sense of security. You're not separated from traffic. So as a pedestrian, you're with traffic, or you're in traffic. So there's no separation from that. Again, not necessarily recognized as an engineered standard for bike or pedestrian use. It's just to delineate the travel lane. That's it. They certainly have some advantages, such as they're less costly, obviously, than a sidewalk. So I think that's probably one of the attractive features of it is paint on the road. It's easier to maintain. And then from that standpoint, generally we clear face to face for snow and ice control. So no one has to worry about clearing the visually narrow lanes of snow and ice. The village takes care of it as part of their routine maintenance. And again, so there's some benefits that way. The other thing I'll mention is it doesn't necessarily provide true connectivity between facilities. So you might have pedestrians that are using, let's say, a sidewalk that terminates or gets to a point of termination, and the only accommodation that they have is that perceived visually narrow lane. And again, that creates some ambiguity. It's like, well, where do I go? Is that lane for me? You wouldn't necessarily be able to add additional markings to say, let's say this is a pedestrian way. Even if you did, it wouldn't give you any legal standing then. There's no way to mark. You can mark it, but it's not going to really give you any legal standing, right? The exception to that would be if you were to mark it as a dedicated bike lane, because then you'd have some lawful standing. You could, well, no, you can't. You can't even mark, you shouldn't even mark it as a share road unless you have enough width between the back, front of curb and the overall width of the lane. So you have to have, like, let's say 8 feet width from the curb for parking, and then you need 3 feet of separation, and then you have to have, basically for a share road, you have to have 3 feet of separation from, or it has to be in the travel lane. I'm trying to remember.
Cheryl's.
Cheryl's gonna be in the travel lane, it has to have 3 feet of separation from the lane, from the marked lane.
No.
Sorry. Okay.
Cheryl's are placed, if there's no parking there, they're basically telling the bicyclists where to ride, so they would be placed off the curb, maybe 3 feet off the curb. If there's parking allowed there, then they would be placed in the travel lane.
Yep, but 3 feet from that parking lane. You wouldn't have the share row less than
It would,
3
yeah, it would
feet.
be in the travel lane,
So think of like, the share row should have 3 feet of separation from whatever side obstruction it might have. Whether it's the curb, whether it's a car. Essentially, you want to make sure that your bicyclists aren't weaving within traffic, right? You want them to flow straight and be predictable to motorists.
And the Cheryl wouldn't have a line at all.
Right.
It doesn't have a line, but.
You wouldn't
no-
create
yeah,
the stencils kind of in and out.
Right.
It would be a straight shot through the
Yeah.
travel.
Depending on if there's parking there or not. So if you have a block that allows parking, then you would have it out further. If the next block doesn't have parking, then you would move it in. So you might have situations, like if you look on Broadway, in the north end of Broadway, it's that way. When you ride, there's one section that there is parking, so then it's out a little further, then you get further north, and then there isn't, so then it's closer to the curb, so.
So with that, on the visually narrow lanes, the plan identified under policies that if a road is redone, then the visually narrow lanes would not be reinstalled. So there was a desire at that time that these visually narrow lanes, because they don't have any legal standard, that they should not be used for the purposes of pedestrian travel, right? And so they should be really used for an intended purpose that meets a lawful or standard engineering practice.
When was that done?
When the last plan was updated in 2018. So if we have roads that are being repaved, then in all likelihood, they would not receive the visually narrow lane if they had previously had one.
The board decided that? Or we decided that?
Well, when the plan was adopted, so obviously
I think
the
it came
committee
through this first.
created the plan and then the board ultimately adopted.
It was right when I was getting on the committee, it was like just getting done. And I remember there were people very passionate
Well,
about that.
yeah, I remember the passionate part. But
Yeah.
I didn't remember it going through that we wouldn't put the lines back.
So I think what we would look to from an engineering standpoint is if we were gonna put the lines back on the road, it wasn't the intent to provide an accommodation, because it's not. The intent is to potentially, because there is an engineering standard that you can create narrowed lanes in order for it to be an optical traffic calming measure. And you could do that a variety of different ways. You could have a wider center line, you could have a narrowed or wide shoulder, a delineated shoulder, an edge line. So you would do that, but the intent isn't that area along the shoulder to be intended for pedestrian travel. Pedestrians may use it because they can use the road under traffic law, but it wasn't to be encouraged as an alternative to another safer, more pedestrian accommodation, like a sidewalk.
So it seems, my take is on what you're trying to tell us is that line, the visually narrow lines, was aimed at motorists rather than cyclists, pedestrians. It was to change the behavior of the motorists.
So I think from an engineering standard that is the case. It was more to change the behavior of the motorist to provide an optical illusion, if you will, of calming. But here in Ashwaubenon, I think there was this idea or perception that if we marked a space on the road, then that's for pedestrians, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And would you
Well, what
Agree
happened,
with
I
that?
was park director here at the time, Joe Layden was on the village board, if you can remember Joe Layden.
Absolutely.
We had in my neighborhood, there were two older women that walked all the time. I mean, they probably wore out shoes, they walked so darn much. And they had approached him saying, hey, you know, there's no sidewalks in our area, what can we do? So he came up with striping the visually narrow lanes to kind of appease them, I guess. And they just kind of took off from there. When they first were implemented, like Joel was saying, no one knew what they were. And we had DOT call the village saying, what are these things? What are we supposed to be teaching kids? You know, because on the road, if you have a traditional bike lane, for instance, on the side of the road, when you get close to an intersection, just look behind, it's hashed. And that's telling the motorists, please cross over. If you're taking a right, cross over this and take the right from the closest right lane, is what you typically do as motorists. But with the visually narrowed lanes, what people were doing is they were staying outside of that lane. So they were staying further away from the curb. And we had a couple accidents where people were at the curb to go turn right, and then someone kind of cut them off. So that kind of started when it first went in, they had a lot of that kind of thing going on because they didn't understand, like in public safety, didn't know what they were. Like Joe said, there's no standing in engineering design. So they just were something kind of that the village made up and decided that because we didn't have sidewalks, this was a need for.
Well, there's other cities that
Safely.
have them though, so they didn't make them up, right?
I think they were one of the first. Visually narrow lanes was coined here. It was the name
Oh, it
that
was,
they came up
okay.
with, yes.
Because there are other,
Yeah.
I read the articles, there are other cities that are using.
And they probably are now, but they're probably defined differently and have different criteria to them, but, so yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And then our insurance company was like, don't put them down. They're not, there's no standard for them, you know, liability wise, you're gonna be responsible for anything that happens. And, you know, this committee looked into them, you know, several times. And, you know, one of the things with them too is they're confusing, like Joel said, is it a bike lane? Is it a visually narrow lane? What is it? And I think it confuses motorists, it confuses bicyclists, it confuses everybody is what they are. So I'm glad to hear that they're looking at taking them away. And, you know, my question would be on that list that we have, Joel, if maybe you guys went through them already, but how many of them are already gone?
Yeah, we need to go through that because
Okay.
we picked up our mill pave a lot in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So I need to go through the list and identify them. I haven't found any yet on this list that fits that. But there are probably a few, I just haven't identified those, so I can certainly do
Joel,
that.
if I could ask, on Cormier Road, which is where I live, they have a visually narrow lane, and that's also parking there, so if, from the standpoint of trying to be a cyclist, that's worthless. But on Cormier Road, it appears, even without that, it appears that there's 2 lanes of traffic. And they have those signs there with a designation with an X next to you're not supposed to ride next to the curb. Do these lines have anything to do with that, or is that?
Well, they will now, so I think with some change in MUTCD guidance over the many years. So putting that solid edge line in there and then placing that signage, so you have 1 through lane, and then the X identifies that that is not a travel lane.
Yeah,
That's all
I
that
think
means.
that
So
signs,
that's what
the
it's
signs
intended
say
for.
that.
So if you saw 2 cars driving in the same direction, law enforcement would be able to then issue a citation because you were traveling in the non-designated.
So if someone's waiting to make a left turn on Cormier, you can't go around. Legally, you shouldn't go around.
Should not, right, correct. And that, I believe is, and I'm not an expert on traffic law, but even like in a rural section, so if you did not have a fog line or an edge line, you're able to pass on the right. But if you have an edge line, a white solid line, you cannot pass on the right for a left-hand turn car.
That happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
Yes, yeah.
I'm just looking at the Ridge Road and Hanson Road for
I
crying
was
out loud.
thinking Hanson too.
Oh, yeah.
When you're going up Hanson Road and you get the ridge and you got 2 or 3 cars that are making a left turn,
Everyone goes, yeah.
you know.
Didn't we have Ashwaubenon here for that specifically? And I thought, so,
We had this
I
conversation.
say we had something, but I
The
thought
white
they,
lines in the,
yeah,
I remember
they- I
that
say
correctly,
they
you
told
can
us-
cross any
I
white
say
line.
they told us that they could when Ashwaubenon was here because you're going around it and there was no, like they talked specifically about that at Hanson. And then, school
Hanson
drop
was the
off
road.
was the other one. So they were
It may not
saying,
be signed correctly to disallow.
I said,
That's what it
I don't
is.
know. So yeah, that might be,
Because I asked the question, I said, even when you're going on an on-ramp, you have all the white lines,
Yeah,
you can go across those anytime you want.
Yeah.
Was the comment
Yeah,
that we had from safety.
I know, that's because we were all very like
Yep.
trying to figure out, we're like,
Yep.
okay, well,
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can you do it?
a white line does not designate that you can't go across
cross it, yeah.
But
'Cause
a bike lane, if it's a true bike lane,
Well,
the
that,
only
yeah,
time you can cross it
Right,
is if
But it
you
says
are
bike
turning
lane.
right, or if they're turning right into the old Wellington, which is now, I can't remember, what's up to Bailey?
I think it's for sale.
If you turn right there, then you can move into that and,
Yeah, if you're turning.
and go.
We'll have to
But
reconfirm
technically,
that
you
white
can't
line.
go
Uh,
someone around.
I heard
on
the
the
same
right.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I know they discussed that maybe hashing that there because they figured people were going to be doing that.
I
You
think
know?
that it was at one time, if I remember right, at one time that was a hash mark going up Hanson Road.
Yeah.
Before you got to what is it, SIAA or whatever on the right hand side. Yeah, and you go to the left on Ridge. I thought at one time there was a dash mark, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not positive, but I
Yeah.
think there was. And then eventually that was made to a solid line.
I think oftentimes from an enforcement standpoint, not only, I think they need signage in addition to markings in order
probably
to
didn't
make
have
some
that
enforcement.
sign.
So if you think about handicap parking, if you have a stencil on the pavement saying it's handicapped only, they can't enforce it
Right.
if there isn't a
Not the
sign
sign.
posted. It's the same with a lot of no parking type situations. So you have to have signage.
Makes sense, but sometimes you
you
can't see it.
can't see it.
You drove over the top of it, you don't know you're right. That's a good point.
If there's snow or ice or something.
But even when you're commenting about the white lines on the highways, I just talked to somebody and I've run into it. When it's raining and it's pouring out, it's nice to have that white line on the highway on the side, because it does help. Especially with these old eyes, but even this was a younger person that said the same thing. She was coming back from Madison. She says, I almost went off the road. They're so light, they haven't been painted in a while. Right?
Yeah.
So your comment hit home right away.
So I think for this conversation, I think where this kind of was born from a little bit was a little bit of the conversation on Parkview and a little bit of the conversation last month on North Road as well, as far as, well, could we just mark in a white line? You could, but again, it's not necessarily intended for that purpose. It doesn't give any real legal authority, if you will, to be there. We're talking with staff, if we're gonna recommend adding edge lines or white solid lines on the shoulder of the roads, it's really just to delineate where that travel lane should be, but then it should coincide with appropriate signage to suggest that this is a parking lane, a bike lane, or something along that stretch, so that it gives that legal standard for what motorists should expect.
So is the village actually at risk if somebody was to get hit in that white lane?
Could be just because
Just
there's
because we
no
put the white
standard for
lane
it.
on the road?
It's not a standard.
But it wouldn't be any more risk than we currently are.
Oh, it could, because it's not legal, I guess is the best way to say it, because our insurance company said, don't put them
Yeah.
down. And so
Well, you're-
it is it's like if you put a purple stop sign, for instance.
Right.
And someone went right through it because it wasn't standard colors and size and all of that stuff. The village could be liable for that.
But if you said people use them for calming effect and that so
I think if we were, in the past, it had been a heavy promotion that this is your pedestrian
right, I say, because it's kind of
Use
two different
this.
things, like, because we're not saying it's a pedestrian accommodation, but if they put it on there because it's gonna calm traffic, like North Road, for example, and slow traffic down going through that area.
I would say,
Like, what is the
if-
purpose
as long
of
as
it?
we're not encouraging or inviting people to say this is your safe accommodation, use
Right.
this.
Because it isn't, and I
You
don't
have a
think it ever
right
should
to
have
use the
been
road as
for
a
that.
pedestrian under the law, right?
Right, right.
So as long as you're using the road in the terms of what the law provides for you, and
Right.
you follow the rules of the road and the responsibilities you have, you should be okay. But I think a lot of times people were using them
Like a sidewalk
in
or a,
conflict with the law. So they're like, well, I'm in
Right.
this lane, so now I can just walk on my side of the street. When in reality, under the law, I should be walking in opposition to traffic, right?
yes.
It's confusing, it's confusing enough out there, the way it is with all the different, techniques or different designs that are out there. And then when you have vision, you're like, that looks very much like bike lane. but then people can park in it, or they can't, and people can walk in it and bike in it. So it's just, I think it's confusing for everybody to have that out there and not any signage or standards that it's abiding by. Because even Joel's saying, some are 8 feet, some are 12 feet, some are 11 feet, and that's confusing as well.
My concern though is the other side of that is the person that's in the vehicle. And they got people on the road and like, they shouldn't be on the road. They don't have a right to the road. At least the white line gives them, even though they still don't have a right to the road, at least it's something that tells them, hey, there's, especially here, I'm not saying in a city or someplace that has sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks. And I walk every day. And the speed doesn't make any difference. The lines don't make a whole lot of difference for speed. Not on Pioneer. They're 40 to 50 miles an hour by the time they get to the other end. But at least I don't see them trying to pass a vehicle that's turning on the right-hand side because there is a white line there. Things like that. That's my only point. But if we're at risk, that's a whole different story for the village, without a doubt.
Well, I think with this, maybe Joel, if staff could look at the roads that are listed on here and see which ones actually have lines anymore, and maybe recommend, okay, these 3 or 10 or whatever it is, don't have lines, we're not gonna stripe anymore, they're done. And then maybe look at the other ones, make recommendations on, well, maybe there is some need for some kind of accommodation here. Let's look at maybe bike lanes for here. Let's look at, maybe signage for here. Let's look for Cheryl's here. So something that can make sense and is properly FHWA, Federal Highway allowed or recommended. And but then we can look at it all and kind of gradually say, okay, this is what we think. This is where we should go in this road, because every road's kind of different. Like North Road you mentioned.
Right.
It's wide, especially on that piece close to Oneida Street. You could have 4 lanes, going that way. So maybe looking at them individually, and the staff can do some recommendations and look at what they would say, take them off totally. They're not needed here. Then we can go from there.
I suspect that this plan, the visually narrow lanes that were in here, and the understanding that they were this kind of pedestrian accommodation, if you will, probably, and then the idea that when the plan was first created and then ultimately revised, there was this concept that we weren't going to put sidewalks everywhere. Right. And then there was this idea, well, we already have these, that's good enough.
Yeah. Right.
And so there were, as an example, Morris Avenue has visually narrow lanes.
Yeah.
Morris Avenue is a pretty busy street, right? Kind of similar, maybe not quite to the level of Cormier as you head west, but especially during certain times of the year and its proximity to Titletown and things of that nature, probably could be a road that should have sidewalks versus visually narrow lanes.
Yes.
Just with the volume of traffic and such.
Well, and I think that's a great thing for staff to look at. Like you said, there's different roads that, sidewalks should go. Get the pedestrians out of the road because it's more busy. It's safer for them to be walking on the sidewalks. So maybe if you guys can look.
Then you need to get the people who live there to agree that they want sidewalks.
That's a tough one.
We've been through this.
Yeah.
I know you have, but I guess if it's at least in the plan, then in the future, who knows, maybe in the future, people will have to go, hey, sidewalks are a great thing. I want one by my house, But,
I don't think it should
things
be,
change.
I don't think the visual and narrow lane should be used as or even just let's do this instead of a sidewalk or I agree. I think at the time there was a lot of conversation about almost all around the pedestrians when I decided to go away with it, because I don't think it should be this is Ashwaubenon's way that we accommodate pedestrians. We don't look at sidewalks, we don't worry about bike lanes, this is what we do. And I agree that visual narrow lane shouldn't be that, because Morris Avenue is a great example. We shouldn't just say the line's good enough when really maybe we should be pushing for a sidewalk. But I do think they do affect the motorists. So I think in areas where we can't accommodate pedestrians in another way, I do think they have the calming effect on the drivers. So in certain areas, I do think they make sense to try to narrow the drivers, and whether it doesn't slow them down or what, if it's a calming effect or whatever the engineering term is for it. I do think in certain areas it does make people realize I need to stay here, and especially down around the Titletown area where, again, I remember the conversation about, well, we can't restrict parking because they needed all that road parking there. That still exists, but yet you also have all these people walking in that area. It's kind of a nightmare, and I don't think there is necessarily a perfect solution, but I think if there's not a sidewalk, it was kind of like a compromise. And again, I don't think it should be we want to put these everywhere. I think we really should be pushing for sidewalks, but I do think in some areas it still makes sense to have a line, because it does make the drivers aware, like not type 2, like North Road is the other one. Again, I don't think they should be everywhere. This list I think is kind of crazy, but I think there are places it's applicable, because I do think as a driver, taking myself and putting that hat on, if there's a white line there, it does keep me here more. It holds me tighter to the center line as opposed to if there isn't a line there. So just for my own driving, I personally feel myself.
I think you're right.
doing
These need to be looked at as something for the motorist and
Yeah.
not as a way of
pedestrian.
accommodating a pedestrian.
Correct.
We should just say these are for motorists and just keep cyclists, pedestrians and scooters and everything out of the conversation.
Right.
Is it like an urban fog line? Would that be, is that
Yeah, I'm trying to,
something?
yeah,
I don't know.
it's a fog line, an edge line, it's
Yeah,
called
Yeah,
a wide shoulder marking. I mean,
Yeah.
I've talked to Brian and Steve and some other engineers, and they called it all three of those.
Yeah.
It's just a method that was used for traffic calming in some applications. And I think that signage with the X, you'll see that in other municipalities. For whatever reason, we don't have a lot of that.
Yeah, we just have a couple.
We just have a few, but if you go into other municipalities where they have that delineated urban line, then the X, the sign with the travel lane and the X are there. And that's designated as kind of a parking lane, if you will. It's not intended for travel.
Joe, the other reason I personally am glad that you're taking a fresh look and reducing this, or getting away from it altogether, is there doesn't seem to have been a standard to what streets were put on here. I look at Daisy Lane is a 1-block street that I grew up on. So I don't think you can say, oh, we applied this when these conditions were present. There seems to have been just advocacy. And I
There's
don't
a lot of
think
that
that's
in
a
this
good way to.
I don't want any cars parking in front of my house. Can you paint my curb yellow? And they would do it. They literally would do it.
yeah, no, and that's a good point. I mean, you look at these roads and they're all over the place. Some are collectors, some are arterial, some are slow neighborhood roads. So how did that come to be? Did someone ask about it or whatever happened?
Well, in the village, I'd say 20 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. I mean, how long Titletown has not been along. I honestly forget for how expansive Titletown is. I forget how new Titletown is. Like,
Yeah,
when they had that Facebook post, was that last year that it was like the 5 years?
was it really long?
I was like, that literally is so neat. No wonder we're all confused, because
Yeah.
think of how different that area was
Yeah.
pre-Titletown.
Yeah.
It was a whole different, and now we've changed substantially, so we have to look at this differently now too, because it's attracting a whole different traffic
Well, we
flow.
wouldn't have to look at it differently to put sidewalks in the beginning.
That's exactly ideal.
This may bleed into the next agenda topic, but if I were to offer kind of my personal opinion, knowing Ashwaubenon for just a short while, so I'm certainly no Ashwaubenon expert and don't know the history or the context, but I recognize this being kind of a suburban community that developed in the 70s and 80s. And so that's evident when you go through the neighborhoods. There was this aversion to sidewalks in the 70s and 80s. Carried into the 90s, it kind of picked up again maybe a little bit, and it's gotten better. I think as you see new communities kind of urbanizing today, you're seeing more attention placed in pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. So we have this after the fact effect that we have to alter. So recognizing that, unless there's this dramatic demographic shift in this community, sidewalks everywhere are probably not going to happen. And that's evident in the current plan, right? That was a big push to tell people that we're not going to put sidewalks everywhere, so don't worry, right? We're going to accommodate somehow in some other way. So if I were to offer my opinion, it would be, in today's modern society, in order to accommodate all users, your arterials and collectors should include kind of a complete streets model, right? Now, with that being said, unless there's this high propensity for incident at a particular location, you're likely to do that type of improvement when the road has to get reconstructed. Retrofitting things is very disruptive, and it's going to make a lot of people mad. So when that road gets fully reconstructed, now would be the time that we should entertain And it could be 30, 40, or 50 years down the road, honestly, it really could. Unless there's this high demand because we've had several incidents or issues and there's this kind of petition to do so, that's probably going to be the sequence or timeline. Otherwise, I think you're going to make a lot of people angry, and it could diminish the outcomes of your plan because you're going to make people politically distraught, and then they're going to put pressure on it, and then things will get done. So that would be my opinion. So when we look at doing the plan next year, really the policy is we're looking at arterials and collectors because these are going to connect all your points of destination. You might have some local streets that are tied into that because you need to get somebody to a school or to a park or something to that effect. But all the other streets beyond that aren't going to be a major issue unless there was this high demand for it. And we time it, we sequence it based on those reconstruction schedules.
Could you maybe, Joel, with staff, do us lay out what are considered arterials and collectors in our community? Because then we'll have a feel for that. And it's typically the bigger roads and the ones that carry more traffic on them is what the arterial collectors are. So that'll give us a good idea when we're looking at the list and everything else. So we know and we understand that as well. Because a lot of the neighborhood roads, you probably don't need a lot of accommodations on because they're slow volume, there's not a lot of people. But then you take Pioneer, for instance. That might be considered a collector just because where it is and the amount of traffic that goes around it,
Well,
so
some of those streets are kind of like you pointed out years back, where when you don't have a stop sign in between.
Yeah.
And you can go from point A to point B, which is a pretty good distance there. You can actually go all the way up the back line if you take the curve.
Yeah.
Some take the curve pretty fast.
Yeah.
So there's no way to slow them down. And they don't all do that. I'm just saying there's people that, but I agree with what's going on here. The only thing is, it's almost like when I went to that meeting that he put on.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, uncontrolled intersections, the pedestrian still has the right of way. I bet you your average person that drives a car has no idea. Because if there's not lines, I don't have to stop.
Right.
This is no
They don't
different.
stop for lines.
And that's my concern, is if you're walking on the side of the road, and I see people walk 2 and 3 abreast, which is crazy, and walk in black. But I always thought, and that's why I like your idea, let's clean it up. But there are areas I think the lines would be advantageous just to give that person most people don't know you can't drive over those white lines.
Right. Oh, I'm sure.
They don't.
Yeah.
So
And maybe you can't, but we were told you could at that time.
So what happens, I'm new to this, but what happens if you put a visually narrow lane like Morris Avenue? And you got a Packer game and you've got those cars parked there. Do the people parking have, and they're blocking the designated pedestrian bike lane?
Because it's
That's
not.
That's a great
That's the
question,
issue.
right?
Yeah.
Because there is no definition as to who has priority.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues is that on Packer game day, cars would park there.
And they do.
And then the pedestrians are out in the
Street
on
and
the
grass.
street. Right.
Or on the grass, so they can get.
That's one of the main disadvantages.
Yeah.
Like, well, then who
Yeah.
who has priority?
Because then could a pedestrian come back and complain, I got hit because I couldn't walk on the designated spot?
Okay, and that's the whole
Yeah.
thing, the
That's
visually
the
narrow
thing.
lane shouldn't be for pedestrians.
Right.
They aren't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't exist.
They could.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what valid legal argument they would
Yeah.
have, but that could be their argument is that the village, you've provided these lanes for pedestrians because that's, we
And I
were
think
at a
the
village board meeting in
Reason why a lot of people
1987.
don't want
Right.
sidewalks is because they don't want to have to shovel it. And a lot of those people are older too.
Right. Yep.
They've been there for 50 years.
Absolutely.
I think most people know and understand when we have a Packer game, that people are walking on the street.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, and people are gonna park on the side of the street, but I get your point. Because that could be any place. Doesn't have to be something going on at the restaurant. It could be on our street. And people do.
Yeah.
So they walk around the car.
Okay, so maybe if anyone has any other questions, otherwise maybe if staff, if anyone can make comments on this, could look at the list.
Yep.
See which ones are there, which ones they would recommend getting rid of, or which ones have already gotten rid of. And then maybe give us a list of the arterials and collectors in the village so we understand that as well. And then maybe Joel, I don't know, with July, August meeting, could they get that back? Okay.
Could I suggest, should we also maybe stop referring, like, I think
Yes,
again, we're talking
mention.
about two different things, visually narrowed lanes, and maybe we start calling it a fog line or something different, because I think in the village, a visually narrowed lane in 1987
Yeah.
was talked about as a pedestrian path, and we're saying, and we
That's
all
not what it
agree,
is.
this isn't a real thing, it shouldn't exist. But then we're also talking about the white line, and again, as more of a fog for the drivers. So I feel like maybe if we differentiate the verbiage, that would help, because again, I think visually narrowed lane saying, pedestrians walk here should not exist. But when we're talking about keeping white lines or the fog line, and we're talking about with the driver, maybe we call it fog line, so that again, it's two different things, because they really are two different things we're talking about, but I think maybe that would help keep the conversation
And maybe
and
in the
education to the public clear.
Yeah, and maybe in the bike ped plan, we can really make sure that that is part of it, that they're no longer being out. They're
Right.
gone. We don't
We're
have
not
those
encouraging
anymore.
people to walk
No.
on this, that's not what this
No.
is. If
And-
we're putting a white stripe, it's for the drivers.
Right, and maybe if the engineers, like you said, can do some more research, and maybe you've already talked about it quite a bit, but see what would be a good name and what would be
Right.
a standard that would follow.
Yeah,
um,
more
highway.
current times.
Yeah,
So one last thing, when we do the new plan, Joel, I guess I just want to make sure that the committee, whether I'm on the committee or not, it has the ability to have some input when they're redoing a road. It seems like we do right now, but how do we guarantee that we have a seat at the table at that point to start talking about, maybe we should have a bike lane in this road, maybe we should have a whatever. How can we somehow have that in our plan that the village board would
So what I
agree
would,
with?
yeah,
that,
what
or-
I would recommend is, so the plan has like policies, right? And the policies are just kind of standard acting principles. So if one of our policies is simply that when an arterial or collector road is scheduled for reconstruction, so not necessarily just general pavement maintenance, but to reconstruct, that at that point, a complete street type design is considered for that road. I wouldn't say that every street's gonna have sidewalk, or every street's gonna have a bike lane, or every street's, but you will take into account pedestrian, all modes of transportation when designing the reconstruct of that road. And then that could come back to the committee then, and then you can evaluate at that point. Well, we don't really need bike lanes here because this is we don't have enough road width, there's not enough right of way, and let's say it's a fixed route transit line or something to that effect. And because of these things, we want to accommodate more transit than we can accommodate other uses, whatever. So that way you're not limiting yourself to one specific design, but that you will consider all modes of transportation. So that would be my thought is you have the policy will then dictate that based on this reconstruct that we bring it through committee. The committee is evaluating what modes of transportation it would recommend to be considered. And then ultimately that design concept, that cross section of that road would come to the board for approval. That approval then tells staff and the engineers, this is what the design should include, if that makes sense.
yeah, and I think listing complete streets in there is, because there's already design criteria for complete streets that's out there, and to kind of say, this is kind of our guide for it.
More of a standard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a sphere that when you say complete streets, that it's gonna include all these things. It doesn't. What complete streets does is it just forces you to think about all things.
Yes.
Right, so you look at all modes of transportation, and there may be circumstances where you cannot accommodate it.
Right.
Because there's other physical constraints, or other environmental constraints, or budgetary constraints, right? And we only have so much right of way, and there may be only certain things that you can accommodate.
When you also look at what's occurring along that corridor.
Right.
When it was originally built, maybe it was more of a rural road. Now we've added 10 subdivisions to it, and people have to get out on that road to move, because that's the only way they can get out.
Right.
So we need to really think about how someone's gonna walk out there and how someone's gonna bike out there, so that you have to look at what the land use is around it too, to help make a good decision.
It could be a highway, so like Packerland is just the prime example. You have the north end of Packerland of the village that has has the path, right, the side path. But there are dozens of driveways that intersect with that path.
Yeah.
Probably a terrible idea
Yeah.
to put that path there because of all the conflicts. As you go down to the south, now you start to get to more of a restricted highway type environment. And maybe I'm not saying it does, but maybe the path looks better there because you don't have as many conflict points. And you have higher speeds, maybe you're in more truck traffic, whatever. So having that separated side path is better than having, let's say, an on-street accommodation. So same road, different, as you were mentioning, different elements, and you're gonna evaluate based on the built surroundings as to what is going to be the best accommodation in that location.
Sometimes it's just the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. All right, anything else on A anyway? Any other questions or any direction? So we'll, staff, if you have time in July or August, to bring that back with some of that information for us to look at a little more and see kind of where we're at on that.
Thanks for the explanation, though. That was helpful.
All right, then we'll go on to 8B is consider, discuss, act on Village of Ashwaubenon pedestrian bicycle plan facilities priorities. And Joel.
So yeah, this one was, again, kind of a carryover from the last meeting or two. We had some conversations about several roads, one being Parkview Road. There was kind of, I don't know necessarily a definitive action on that particular request. There was conversation regarding North Road, and I believe that there was action taken on that particular request, that we would incorporate North Road into the plan. It would be prioritized as a project. But from there was some conversation by the committee about not necessarily specifically a Parkview Road, but the idea or concept that if it's not Parkview Road, then is there another connection that could be made with a designated bike lane or a different bike route, and so on and so forth. So that is really the basis for today's agenda item is, are there other priorities within the map that you were provided in the packet that, I know what you're going to say, Hanson, right? No.
You can say Pioneer.
No. Yeah, right. So are there other priorities that maybe aren't identified in the plan? Because that's really the basis of it. There were other roads that, I'm trying to think of an example. Carroll Lane, for example, was identified on one map for a bike lane or some kind of bike route. But then what do you do with Ponderosa and how do you get to the school? And so it was more of, are there areas that we're missing in the plan that don't connect the points of interest through kind of the four, let's say, quadrants of the village that are divided by the highway systems?
You don't know, I was not here. I couldn't make the last meeting, but I was happy to be talking to Mary one day, and she was saying that Parkview was brought up, and I guess I see, I look here and I see that everybody voted against what was recommended or what was talked about, and I was wondering from a while back. Oh, it would have been the last meeting. Okay.
We really voted on Parkview.
Yeah, you voted on it.
But the big concern was,
what was the reason
it
why?
had to do with the parking.
It had to do with parking by the
By the volleyball.
facility.
Yeah.
That's what really
Yeah.
was driving it,
Right.
but yeah.
So is that the only section that you're worried about is just by the volleyball? I mean, the reason why I'm asking this is because I know a lot of people that are in the pier and even Ashwaubenon, I don't know about Kyle or anybody else, that uses that road. That road is a biking road. It is the only road to go between Ashwaubenon and the pier other than Hanson Road. I use Hanson Road. I mean, that's just me,
Hanson's good too.
Well, yeah, I mean, you gotta go through the stop and go lights and you gotta cross Ashland, but you gotta cross Ashland when you go on Parkview also, And the reason why I say other bikers, and I do know of other bikers in the pier that use that road. So, but I mean, I was just wondering, what was the reason why it was voted against? I mean, I guess.
Well, I think we were talking about restricting parking in that,
Yes.
and that section.
Because right now bicyclists can use it and people can park where.
So if we put it,
that as
if we're gonna put a bike lane
Well,
there,
no
then you
bike
have to
lane,
take that.
But we
you
were
have to
talking
take
about
the
bike
parking
lanes and white lanes.
Because we talked about.
Parking with, I don't know,
Say that again, bike lanes and white lanes?
a non-designated bicycle lane.
Like we talked about putting sharrows on it.
Yes, yep, yes.
And that's still up for discussion was, are we
Yeah,
gonna
I don't
do
think we
sharrows
finalized it.
or are we
Yeah.
going to try to find an
No.
alternate route?
Yeah.
But the goal was to figure out which.
So
way
we
to go
actually,
with it.
I thought we left it with going to see if there's some possibility of another way to get back to Parkview, but I actually visited it. I just don't, I don't see how you do it.
Cheryl would be better.
I mean, you'd have to come back on Holmgren. Because you can't take, what's the road before that, Market,
Way.
no.
No, Golden Mile Way?
Was it
No,
Golden?
what's
You
the,
got Holmgren Way, that's the
Where's the
first
next-
road you're gonna come up to.
what's the next one?
But anyways, Allied.
Bridge.
No, it's Allied.
Glory Road.
Which
No, I'm
direction?
talking going west.
Allied.
So there's Ridge,
Isn't it
there's
Allied?
Allied, there's,
Yeah, and then you got,
Commodity. So
Yeah,
there's,
Mark.
What's the one between Holmgren and? Anyways,
if
you're just beyond the business, so it's not gonna help you, then you're gonna still be going past his.
Right.
You have to go past it.
I think it just, yeah, I think.
The only thing I could see is if
Yeah.
if there was a way you could make a bike lane along Ashland on the grass from, Glory Road all the way back, which people aren't gonna do.
Right.
No.
They're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And there's businesses there, so you'd probably have to get right away besides. I think up further, going north.
So I think what was attractive about Parkview was that the DOT made those improvements at Ashland for that crossing, which
Yep.
is different than what any other crossing had. I don't know that we necessarily discussed this, but under the bike plan, Parkview is listed as just having a wide shoulder, which is what it has now.
Right.
One of the options, and it would be something that we want to cross-check with the MUTCD, but we've talked about these visually narrow lanes that we're not going to call that, right? But a delineated drive lane with a dedicated parking lane, which is what the businesses would like, with a share row. So a delineated share row in the drive lane, so you'd have the bicycle chevron and the icon in the drive lane. You'd have the dedicated parking lane, which by default would add some calming measures throughout the day potentially. But then you have it marked as a bicycle route.
then you can't park there.
Nope,
Yes,
it would not be a bicycle lane. So the icon, the bicyclist icon and the chevron would be in the drive lane of travel. So many feet away from the dedicated parking lane, because in order to meet the standard, you'd have to have so many feet of distance. And then the parking lane would be just dedicated for parking. So when you add parking there, you got cars, but at least then motorists understand that bicyclists use this as a route. So it is a dedicated bike route. And then when there's no parking going on, it's still kind of that narrowed lane, if you go for driving, to give that calming effect. Which I believe we can dedicate a lane for parking, sign it appropriately, and still meet traffic law requirements to do that. But then you'd have that delineated bicycle route. I think you can accommodate both with the appropriate designation and signage.
Yeah, we have a bicycle route, but not a bicycle lane.
Right. Yeah, because that's kind of how we left it, was we were all supposed to go look at it
Well, that's
after the last meeting
that's
and
what
see
you
did it
wanted,
make
you wanted
sense
road.
to
You wanted
figure
a
out
bicycle
something there or
lane,
a
but
road.
you
No, I want a
Put a
bicycle
bicycle
route.
lane.
I want a bicycle route.
Well, but you originally wanted a bicycle lane, but you can't put a bicycle lane there because it's not wide enough.
That's not why. So,
Well,
because we've got a bicycle lane on what is it, South Point going to the Quick Trip. And I would just want it to direct people on North Road rather than on Cormier Road.
You know, there's so much to this, you guys. And this document that Joel put in here is like a really good document on when you're designing roadways, what to look at for bike lanes. So if you haven't had a chance looking at it, I highly recommend you do. And then maybe we can talk further about the designation, because in this thing, and Jessica has brought this up, but it just breezing through it, like page 3, that blue box on the bottom, kind of summarizes it to a T. It's like, this is what they're there for, this is why they're there, safety in numbers, the more people you encourage to get out, the better it is, all that kind of thing. And they have, and then we talked about, Jessica, we talked about different types of bicyclists. On page 12 and 13, it goes to the highly confident bicyclist, which you guys always give me crap about that. That's probably me and my husband. And then there's a somewhat confident bicyclist. And then there's the interested but concerned. Maybe Jessica and her family would be interested but concerned bicyclist. And you look at the graphic in the bottom on what percentage are what. And when we're designing and we're looking at adding facilities to our roads, we need to keep those types of bicyclists in mind because everybody's different. Like I would go on any road virtually. It wouldn't bother me. Jessica's like, no way, I would never bike on Oneida Street. It would not feel comfortable to me. I would not be out there. So I think we need to think about that too when we're looking at it. And Parkview, your comment on Parkview, you would never go out there, but if there was something that said, Jessica, this is a good place for you to be, Cheryl's bike route, you might go, hey, this is marked for me and my family, and I can go out here and we feel comfortable here because this is kind of saying, hey, this is where I should be. So I think that's what we need to think about too as we're looking at roadways, all these different types of bicyclists and how we can encourage them to go out. Because the more bicyclists we have out there, the more pedestrians have out there, the safer it is for everybody. On page 26 too, there's a really good thing about road diets. We talked about that with this road right out here. It kind of explains them, what the benefits, the, good and bad about it. It was 26. Narrowing travel lanes, removing travel lanes. It kind of spells all of that out as well. And then on the back, it has some really good case studies. So you look at a road, we look at North Road. And in here it says, okay, a narrow road, what are some recommendations to do to make that more bicycle and pedestrian friendly? So this document, I think, would help us a lot on trying to make some decisions.
Parkview, if the guy from the tri-state, whatever his business is, if he hadn't objected to us putting a bike lane in, would we even be looking at this, considering this?
That's a good word,
Parkview
right?
would be.
Mark Williams. Mark Williams, I did speak to him. I reached out to him, kind of talked about it a little bit. He is concerned about the parking there during their tournaments.
Would we even be in addressing this on Parkview if he hadn't brought it to attention?
Maybe not. Maybe it would have just been done.
Just seems like we're spending a lot of time on Parkview, but we don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the issue on Parkview is clearly the parking, right? So he's objecting to bicycle lanes.
Right. But we're spending a lot of time on Parkview.
Well, I think
because of
we
the
need to spend time on
attractiveness of
Parkview.
Yeah.
connectivity to Broadway.
Yeah, because that's the way to get across.
There's a few east-west sections.
Because the Hanson Road, or I tried to go through Glory Road again, and I'm not happy with that roundabout there.
Yeah.
Because you enter it from whatever that street is in the pier, and all of a sudden you're going along, and the road, the lane on the right just takes you out Ashland.
Yeah.
So you have to move over one lane. You can't be in the curb lane. You have to be in the center lane to hit the roundabout.
Remember, we had a big discussion when they were going to
Yes.
do the
Yeah, it was
extra road.
Yes.
And we had it with the pier, because the pier balked at what we wanted to do. And I said, well, about going through the roundabout. I said, going through a roundabout would not bother me. Probably would not bother any of us that are biking. But, there are a lot of people that, boy.
Are afraid of bikes, yeah.
I think Or is just way out of the way too.
Yeah, it seems
Well,
more
yeah.
south, yeah. Yeah.
I'll add, Sharon, that I don't know, because we haven't had the conversation with the village board, but I suspect the board would have some concerns about restricting parking on Parkview Road.
Okay.
There are businesses that do park trucks and things like that throughout business day on Parkview. So I do believe that they would at least ask us to petition or ask the businesses what impacts that would have on their operations.
And that's what you got from that guy.
Yeah, and I think that in many cases, bicycle lanes generally elicit, unless they're coming from bicyclists, a negative response from businesses and residents, because it does restrict their parking. Even though they may never park there ever, like, you're gonna disallow me from ever parking here? Well, then I'm not going to.
So.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's the reality.
Jessica mentioned Glory Road. Okay, I go on Fridays, I go work out at the YMCA. And my best route is to go, onto Glory Road. And I'll tell you what, that Glory Road that's a busy road.
Yeah.
That's a busy road. You got FedEx trucks going up and down. You got traffic that's going back to our industrial park,
Right.
you know, and you got Green Bay Packaging, not Green Bay Packaging now.
No, it's over there too, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a busy road.
Schneider's there.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because people come off the highway, they'll go Ashland, take the roundabout and go into the back way to the
Yep.
industrial park.
Exactly.
But Sharon, to give you a visualization, if you've never been there,
I'm
so I'm just saying, when he has something going on, when Mark Williams has
I'm
something,
sure it's busy.
it's blocks of
Oh.
cars parked in the side of the road, on both sides.
Okay.
It's parking lot, it's just-
He just doesn't have, huh?
Mostly on.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Well,
weekends, right, right,
And
right,
it's
right.
one.
And I think, like to Joel's point, I think Mark's the only business owner on that street that got wind that this was being discussed.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
we didn't send anything out to anyone on that street yet, like it never made it
Right,
that
not
far,
that we've
correct?
heard from anybody else.
Cause I don't
We
think that was
haven't- we
ever
haven't-
solicited.
No, we
Yeah.
didn't publish this, or ask
Right.
them.
So,
Mark, and maybe Sharon, you don't know this, but Mark used to be on the village board.
Yeah.
He was on the village board
So
for
that's
the Mark
okay.
Williams, the guy that owns the gymnastics center.
Oh,
And so there are board members that know Mark well, so I'm
So
sure
that's how
they've
he got
communicated with him, hey, did you hear about this? And that's how that.
but Tracy, I
Go
want to
ahead.
bring you back to that point you made about the bottom of 13 in this chart about the types of bicycle users. I think that is such an important chart
Right.
because it is huge. And you are right. I think that, I mean, I consider myself the middle category. But I think how you grow your middle and top category is by taking very good care of your interested but concerned.
Yes. And hopefully move them up. Yeah. And
Yes.
so they're more comfortable in more places
Yes.
and.
So
you know,
thank you for pointing that out because I think that as we go into that plan, that we have to be mindful. We're all very invested in all of this.
Yeah.
We're not the 50% group here that we're trying to grow.
No.
And that's who we want to grow and take care of.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a bicyclist, I wouldn't care. But I know I want to encourage people to bike. I want to make it safer and easier for families, for whoever, for the first time bicyclists to go out there and feel comfortable and maybe go a little further. So that's my impetus for making sure our community is that way. For me, it doesn't matter. It's not a personal thing. It's just, I want to encourage everybody to.
That new
And
trail
get
in
those
front of
51.
me is full of families biking.
What is it?
The
Oh, yes.
trail in front of me.
Yes.
So that's a way for them to avoid all that glass
Yes.
on Broadway. And, you know, sometimes it's glass, sometimes it's clean, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't need to, whatever.
Yeah.
Throw shade on that. The point is, that's all the qualifiers that they are looking for in a family bike
Yeah.
ride. And then now I heard you can take them to a hot dog machine.
Yeah.
Well, one day only, right? Or a food truck.
Yeah.
Well, everybody here started out here.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep, and they moved up for,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, that really brings a good point is when we're talking about Parkview Road, even though we're talking a very specific accommodation, maybe as we look at any road, we look at it from the lens of if we were to build this road today, knowing what it is right now, what the
Right.
surrounding land uses, how would you design that road?
Yeah.
If it were me, I would say sidewalks and maybe a share road with a parking lane, knowing that parking is important to the businesses to support their operations, right? If you put a 6-foot wide sidewalk, you can ride a bicycle on a sidewalk. There are limited driveways on much of that stretch. So you could accommodate those interested but concerned cyclists. If I'm a parent with 5 and 6-year-old children, we're on the sidewalk. This is the reality of it. I'm not riding on that road with semis.
And you're never gonna cross Ashland. You're never gonna go to the.
We'll never go that far.
You'll never go that far.
Or I'm going to find a route that will get me to wherever that destination is that avoids that truck traffic that's there.
Or you're gonna go out on the weekend when there's nobody out there in the industrial park.
Yep.
These big wide roads and there's nobody there because they're all closed for the weekend.
Right.
So
I'm
industrial
gonna
parks are
drive to
great.
the Railroad Museum, park your car and then go down Broadway.
Yeah, we will do that too, right? We'll
Yeah.
pack up the bikes, throw them in the car, and then find a destination
And
to
that's
stop.
fine.
And then
I
we'll
get
ride
up
our
there
bike.
if it's a little all the time.
Yeah.
Because we'd want to go.
But I
on
don't want to
trails
forget
tonight.
about the person that's not just doing it for entertainment. And
Right.
A good example of it, I mean, I went to a new doctor, it's in Bella. We were just talking about his father, and I just mentioned something about bicycles. I ride bikes here every day. You know, and then he's probably not the only one. There's a lot of younger
It's not
people
David Speaker, is it? Is it David Speaker?
No.
Oh.
No.
No, there are people that need the
Oh,
transportation.
that's good though, Leroy. You should bring it up. You should
I
bring it
forget,
up.
I have what's my opinion.
And you should. That's why we're here, so.
Do you want to give us an assignment from
So I think-
this?
I think what the intent was, and that's why I kind of threw that packet in there, is look at the map that was attached at it. And I don't know, again, the full context or the history behind the plan, but as we go and we start to develop an updated plan, now is a great time to do it. Even though we're not going to get into the nuance of creating an updated plan, at least you can start going and looking at these mapped areas and say, does this make sense? So when we get to that part of the planning document, you're like, oh, this is why we're talking about X.
This map is really nice, except I don't know what all these numbers are.
That's
Yeah.
in the plan,
Yeah,
so we'll
Right.
detail it in our plan, so everybody hopefully
But
has the current
but-
plan.
If you, when you got that email with this packet, you could click on the link, it took us to this, you can look at this map. It was really good if you look at it.
Yeah, and you could go in and.
Yeah, you can look at it and, you know, you could, because kind of, you show where the plan, bike lanes and everything are, bike route. Yeah, maybe it's because I have old eyes, like Dale said, but I can't read it. But if you look at it on,
the other thing I'll mention too is, and this kind of delves into that complete streets concept as well, is so like Parkview Roads right now in the plan says wide shoulder, but Hanson Road says on-street bicycle lane. Just put on-street bicycle accommodation, just call it that. Don't define what it is yet, because that's just gonna get people all worked up,
We're out there.
right? We're not there yet, and then unless there's a specific route that we have to do, let's identify the routes that are important to accommodate maybe either on-street or off-street. And then from there, as projects come about, we can then prioritize that in the list of priorities. That's what I would recommend. Because then I don't know that you're gonna get people pretty anxious about whatever you're planning, right?
one of the things when I brought up North Road is I just wanted to just stake our claim on that now, that we're interested in that now. So it's in the plan. So in the future, there's going to be something, oh yeah, they were talking about that in 2024. You know, so it's always in the back of somebody's mind. If you bring it up now, rather than we got the plan because we're going to add lanes and we're going to resurface it, or somebody's going to put a warehouse, and you know, then all of a sudden it's a problem because you know we never talked about it. But if we talk about it now, and it's like any other thing, if we start talking about it early, then we've always sort of got our foot in the door.
I think that's kind of that's the same thought process that I had, is go through the map, identify those routes where you think those accommodations make sense. You don't have to identify what type of accommodation, but this is clearly, and Leroy's point before, one of the roads that we talked about last meeting that we didn't mention today is Glory. Glory is a true east-west connection between the far west side of the village to the far east side of the village. It's not identified in the plan at all for anything.
And you know what, it wasn't because at the time, the road was in such poor condition
Sure.
that they didn't put it in there. And it just was not, basically a bicyclist would not want to be on there.
Are you
And so
sure
they
of that?
didn't keep that. Yeah, it was bad.
You're on this end of the spectrum.
Yeah, he's,
There's
yeah.
a good case in point of, hey, this is arterial or
Right.
collector road.
Yeah.
When this gets reconstructed, we recognize the length of it so long, it's not gonna all get done at one time. It could be broken into 10 segments, but as each segment gets completed, we're gonna kind of think about how we're gonna accommodate multiple users throughout the entire corridor.
I mean, that section of Glory from, I think it's Holmgren is the first one, and then it's where our little homes are, like far to the east side. That is really narrow, and it's the only piece that's really narrow. If you could just put a shoulder on there and reduce the speed in that area, Because when you start going to west, it's wide, it's big, it's an industrial road, but that section getting through there is tough because it's narrow and there's no place for a bicyclist or pedestrian in that area. And it's just one like black section or whatever the heck it is, pretty short. So I'll look at that. But one other thing in this is, if you think of roads, it's very difficult for someone to take a road and it's been that way for 30 years. Because we know our roads stay there for 20, 30 years once they're built. And all of a sudden you're redoing it and they cannot possibly envision it being changed. And that's where you get some of the pushback. It's like, well, it's always been that way, it's fine. But maybe it is not. And if you look at the, on page 36, for instance, it has the roadway for a 2-lane configuration. If you could think of that as Grant Street, which is the farthest south road. It's a rural section, looks just like that. They have different options in here that they list, like a shared use path option, a wide shoulder option, a narrow shoulder option. So, and then they have different resources that you can go out and look and say, okay, if we go with this, you should look at the AASHTO guideline, we should look at FHWA, to see what their recommendations are. So it's really good information for us when we start looking at roadways, saying, okay, what are the benefits? They list, okay, the bicyclist benefit is this, the motorist is this, the pedestrian is this, transit is this. So it gives us a really good idea of why that change maybe is good or bad, or how it's going to affect these different users. So it's kind of a good thing to, help us to make a good, again, decisions based on good sound.
Could we maybe get the
studies
village
that
to
are-
invest in a 3D program that takes each road and makes it look like what we might want?
Exactly, yeah. But it's just interesting to see the different designs that you can have, and it's nothing that's unique to us. I mean, FHWA and AASHTO and these standards have all been set in place. There's tons of data supporting it, and it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel. It's here,
Yeah. That's
So-
a great point, because I mean, even if you look at a 3D, if somebody does a remodel thing, they can have the ability to do a
Right.
3D and give you a visual
At
of what it
least-
might look
yeah.
like. Oh,
Yeah.
big difference.
Yep.
Agreed.
So, I mean, I guess Kim's point, maybe just using this as homework, keep this, hang on to this document, because it's very good. The map that's on here is a bicycle map. There is one, I think, for pedestrians too. So you can look at that in the plan and just get an idea. And then as we move forward with, redoing the plan, we have more knowledge as a group.
So
We can see
Could
this more.
we put this under the bicycle and pedestrian online, so it's there all the time for access?
The bike selection guide, you mean? Or-
Yeah, rather than having to go to the paper, go online. Because our plan's online, you can go and look at our plan online.
Yeah, what I can do is send the link,
But
probably, for
that's,
our
yeah,
highway.
no, that's perfect.
Because that way, if they do
Yep.
adopt or change their bikeway guide, then you'll have to go through.
And you have to put it there. If you send me a link, or maybe you're gonna send it to us, and I'll just save the link. But
Yeah,
whatever works.
I'll email it to the group.
yeah, perfect.
On this map, you have all these numbers. Where are the numbers description?
In the plan itself, these numbers would correspond to, and they'd be detailed in the plan, like
So you
number
go
one.
online to look that up?
Yeah, and I can send the link.
You go online to?
Yeah, you
look
could
up
either,
number three
link to the plan, or you guys should all have a hard copy of the plan. I think that,
Yep,
Terry
we brought
got
that
everyone, did they? Okay, I think Terry gave everybody a hard copy, so if you don't have one, please yell. But that, you could look at that way if you like hard copy better, but otherwise it is on our website as well. But then that would tell you, okay, what does 1 mean? What does 19 mean?
Right, that's,
And then we give you more of an idea. Because yeah, it's confusing when you don't know exactly what those numbers mean, so.
It essentially gives a broader description. of the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, of what it is and what they're planning, what the plan is for there.
The other thing we can do is we can put together, I'll see what we can do on the GIS side, but obviously a map of the village with the arterials and collectors.
Yeah.
And then what I'll do is identify what arterials and collectors have current accommodations on them. And then maybe make a notation of what those are.
That'd be great.
That one might take a little bit, but we'll at least have the map of arterials and collectors, but I want to see how much time we have to collect data if we need data collection in the field.
Yeah, that would be great to get whatever you can to,
Because then you can see the breaks and the links of connectivity.
Yeah.
Where things are.
Yeah. Why does the sidewalk stop here? It's like, turns. Okay, any other questions on that? But, please look through that and then we can look at it again and maybe try for July again to try
And I
to,
started looking through this morning, that's really good, and all of a sudden,
there's a lot of information in
yeah,
there.
it's gonna take me a week to do that.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't put the full blanket head plan in there.
Yeah.
That would've been,
Document, I
Then
want-
you would have been like, oh, man, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, look at the plan. If you don't have it, please let Terry know. She gets hard copy or look at it online. And then, Joe will give you a link for this too if you don't want to look at it online. But it's just a really good document. It'll give us some more knowledge and, help us to make some decisions. And I bet you there's one on pedestrian too, Joel, you think?
I think so.
So maybe if there is one, you can see if you can get a link for that too, because I've never seen a pedestrian one, but I would think there'd be one. All right, so is that the plan for that? Anybody have anything else on that they would like to see or any other comments? All right, 9 is items for next agenda. I think we had talked about last month, seeing if we can get something from Brown County in regard to them doing the bike and pet plan. I don't know if that would be ready in June. Status for that.
Yeah, it's right.
And then July, August, the VNLs, we'll hopefully be able to talk about that more, and maybe this one, July, August, also with doing our homework and then coming back with this in July, August as well. Any other agenda items anybody has that they'd like to see next month? If so, please either get hold of Kelly or Terry, either one. And Kelly, I don't know if you want it just to be you for agenda items or you care?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, okay. Next bike and ped meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 10th. I know I will not be here. Jessica, I'll try to remote in, but otherwise, Jessica, if you're here, if you could share that would be great. If the evening have a meeting, then have that covered.
We can skip it too. It gives us
Yeah.
more time to July.
Yeah.
We don't have any major pressing issues.
Yeah,
Obviously.
Yeah.
That gives you a little bit.
I
of
said
extra
that we're
time.
gonna take that time to
Yeah, 'cause
read that
we-
and
to
be
look at that.
prepared
We
for
would
July.
miss you.
I'm sure you will. Yeah.
Because I'm iffy for that.
Your feet? Okay, so why don't we do that? We'll skip June
Okay.
and we'll look at the July meeting, getting back together.
I like that.
Then Jessica can.
I'm here whatever.
Hopefully I'll be back by then. So. All right, anything else for the good of the whole? Otherwise, I would recommend adjournment. Motion to adjourn, I should say.
All motion.
Second by Sharon, all those in favor say aye.
I
I
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. 5:14.